Hi there, everyone. Welcome along to the Fitness Business Podcast Intensive Show. Now, these are our episodes where we take a deep dive into one specific topic and we hear from an expert guest that is going to make you better in your fitness business. I am so excited to be welcoming today's guest. But before I tell you about her, let me tell you a little bit about the topic that we're going to be talking about today, because we have never done this in the history of the show. We're going to talk about the Enneagram and how the Enneagram can help you work better with your team and your clients. Never heard about it before? Don't worry, because you're about to find out all about it. There are 4 sections we're going to chat about today. First of all, the importance of self-awareness as a leader and an introduction to the Enneagram. Second of all, we're going to talk about the overview of each of the 9 types that fall within the Enneagram, where they're going to talk about leadership style by type and how to use it to grow to be a more effective leader. And last but not least, using the Enneagram to work better with your team and your clients. Now, in just a second, I'm going to introduce you to our very special guest for today, but I want to tell you a little bit about her first. Her name is Sarah Wallace. She is a life and business coach, and she uses the Enneagram to teach entrepreneurs, career professionals, and company leaders how to harness their strengths, how to live an intentional life, and face the fears that are holding them back from getting visible, making an impact, and living their purpose. Few other little fun facts about Sarah. She's the host of the Enneagram MBA podcast. You've got to take a listen to that. She's an Elon Musk super fan, a serial reader. She's an avid spinner. She's run a bunch of half marathons and marathons. She's my type of girl. Let's welcome Sarah to the show. Sarah, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am very excited to be here. I was just going to say, I am honored. And before you hit record, I know we were just like, I'm excited. You're excited. We're all excited. So thanks so much for having me.
It's going to be amazing. It'll be so much fun. And I think by the time we get to the end of this show, people will start to realize that you and I are quite similar in many ways, but we'll talk about that in just a second. So look, I've got to be honest, before we started communicating and we sort of started talking about doing this show, I personally hadn't come across the Enneagram before. It wasn't something that I have been exposed to in my career. So I'm going to guess that there's a lot of people out there that also haven't heard the term. So I think we should start right there. Let's have a little bit of a talk about the Enneagram. You can describe it to us. And let's also talk about the importance of self-awareness as a leader. Over to you, Sarah.
Yes. Okay. So it's not necessarily a personality test, but that is the best way to describe it. And so I'm sure a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with Myers-Briggs, maybe Strength Finder, DISC. And so it gets put into that category, and, rightly so. That's a great starting point. The thing that makes the Enneagram really different, and I think so much more helpful, is because it's not describing, well, for 2 reasons. One, it's not describing your behavior necessarily. It's the motive behind the behavior. So you could have 5 people in a room or on a team doing the exact same thing. And then in this profession, wanting to help others. But the reason behind them being, a gym owner or a manager is going to be, it can be very different. It's that motive that drives people. So that's really interesting. And the second thing that I love about the Enneagram, and that why I think it's such a useful, practical tool for both ourselves and for our teams, is that it's very fluid. Unlike getting a set of, 4 letters, and that's kind of the box that you're in, the Enneagram allows you to actually grow. So it describes what you look like in stress. It describes what you look like when you're living your best life. There's levels of health within that number. You have other numbers that kind of pull in. So it can get complicated, but it's only because we're complex human beings. So it's more representative of the different moving pieces we have. And so it's a really fluid tool that allows you to understand where you're starting from and then give you guidance depending on where you want to go.
Absolutely. And I must admit, because I've probably only just scratched the surface of starting to understand the Enneagram and the different types. And as you say, I think there's something in that complexity as well, which is actually really beneficial, because if you go into that, you can understand, I guess, yourself. So you have that self-awareness that you talk about, but it also starts to help you understand those people that you work with. And I guess for a lot of gym owners out there, it's not only who they work with, but it can also be clientele. So if I'm a personal trainer and I'm trying to connect with my clients, then I would imagine that the Enneagram is a way that I can better understand them as well.
Yeah, and the thing too is that you don't even have to know their type necessarily if it is a client, but just understanding that there are very different ways that people are looking at the world than you are is tremendously helpful. And you can kind of pick up maybe, the more that you learn about your type, the other types, and you can kind of see like, oh, this person might need, and as coaches in your industry, I'm sure that they've already gotten some of this training. It's like what type of motivation might work for somebody might totally deflate somebody else. And so it's just having that understanding. I'm looking at the world through this set of glasses, but somebody else is going to be looking at a completely different set of glasses. And just to understand that that's how I see it. And then that's how somebody else might be seeing it. And just having empathy, compassion, understanding can go so far. And by having those things, you become a more effective leader, a more effective coach, able to help people better because you're able to communicate more effectively.
That makes complete sense, Sarah. So there are 9 different types. Do you call them types and then subtypes? Is that the language that you use?
Yeah. So technically, and we won't get into all of this today, but technically Enneagram theory says, there's really 54 different types.
Yep.
Because you have wings on either side of you, which we'll get into. We won't get into it, but a great starting place is the 9 types.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Archetypes, personalities. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, let's have a look at that. Because I think it's important for us to understand what those 9 types are. So do you want to give us the overview?
Yes, let's do it. Okay. So we'll start with type 1. And can I just give a little preface to this before we jump into the 9 types? Okay. So another thing that makes the Enneagram so interesting is that within each of the types, there's different groupings. And so there is a group that has to do with how you handle conflict. And so there's going to be 3 different ways for how you handle conflict. There's different ways that you bring energy to a team, to your work environment. And then there's different groups for where you make decisions: head, heart, body, instinctive. So as I go through these, I'm just going to kind of share that because I do think it's so helpful to understand that this person makes decisions with their gut versus this person is like very in their head. And the idea for all of this is to integrate head, heart, intuition, right? And ideally, all of the 9 types you're using when you need to, but it starts with understanding your personal starting point, your core motivation, so that you can tap into those and be really self-aware when you need to. So, okay, with that, we'll start with our type 1. And our type 1s are called the perfectionist or the improver. And their core driver in life is to be good, to have integrity, and really improving the world, themselves, the people around them. Getting involved in different things in their community, and looking for ways to improve it. And the worst thing in the world for this type is to be seen as bad, unethical, without integrity. So that's kind of the thing that is driving their behavior. And this type is in this, they're in the body center. And this is where they're going to make decisions from their gut. And this type is really interesting as a leader to know about themselves when they're training others, because this type in the body center, especially, they're going to make decisions from their gut, and they're not going to know why it's the right decision. They're just going to know, like, it's just the right decision.
They're just going to feel it.
Yeah, they're just going to feel it. Yeah. And so that's tough sometimes to be able to explain to your team member why you're doing something. And it can also feel frustrating. Like, I don't know, I'm just doing it. Just do it this way. So that's a good thing to know about yourself. And then this type also has this energy where when they are handling conflict, they are thinking, show me the data, don't give me the drama. We're mature, responsible human beings. I'm sure that we can take a minute and sort this out. So and as we go along, you'll start to understand and kind of see where some friction might happen with how those things come up. Our type 2, and let me know if I'm going through this too fast or too slow.
This is
And we can
perfect.
adjust.
The only thing I'm going to add is I
Yes.
just want everyone to listen to what Sarah's saying and see if you can pick up on those things that, like, because when I heard all of this the first time and I went through, I was like, oh, that's me. You know, when we get to me, you and I are the same. I was like, oh, that's me, that's me, that's me. So I want to encourage all of the FBP family out there as you're listening to Sarah, just keep an open mind and go, okay, what are those things that are making me think, right, that sounds so familiar.
Yes, yes. And this type is very black and we'll talk more about kind of their leadership style. So
Yeah.
we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But the type 2 is called the helper, the caregiver, the caretaker, which, you know, what an appropriate title for those of us in this industry. And this type is driven by the need to feel loved, wanted, appreciated. And so the thing that they're running away from is going to be not feeling appreciated, not feeling loved. And so they'll be very cautious and aware of anything that might interrupt that. And by the way, I do want to say, like, all of us want to feel almost all of these things in some way. It's just that there's going to be one that is that core driver more than anything else. And so when I first went down my own Enneagram journey, rather than thinking about the thing that drove me that I was running towards, it was the thing that I was running away from the most that really helped me determine which type I was, because I was stuck between two for months. But our twos, they're in this positive outlook group when it comes to handling conflict, where they're going to look at the silver lining, put rose colored glasses on. And for them, they're going to think, yes, there's a problem, but I'm here to help. I'm here to help you guys. And then they are in the feeling center of intelligence, where they're going to lead with their heart typically. And their feeling isn't so much about themselves. It's going to be the feelings of others that they're going to pick up on, which is a little bit of a distinction when we get to the other types in the heart triad, the heart group. Our threes, I'm going to guess, Chantel, that there are a couple of threes in your group. They're called the achiever, the role model, the motivator. And this is the type that most of the people in my circle are entrepreneurs, are a leader. And when you read this description, you're like, oh my gosh, yes, I want to be this type. But your type typically is the one that you actually don't want to be. That's how that turns out. But the three is very future focused, thinking what's next. The thing that drives them is success. They not just success, but to be seen as successful. So that's important. Image is very important to them. And so the worst thing in the world is failure. And so that drives a lot of their decisions. So maybe not trying something new because they're afraid they're going to fail could be a characteristic of this type. And when it comes to how they handle conflict in the workplace or anywhere in their life, they're going to be in the same category as that one where they're thinking, show me the data, don't give me the drama. But the way that they're going to be looking at it is efficiency is very important for a three, where they're going to think, I'm sure there's an efficient solution. Let's get to work, hustle hard. It's kind of their motive. And let's figure out what this is. And sometimes there are some similarities between a one and a three, but ones are going to be focused on doing it the right way. So it might take them longer. They might actually miss deadlines. And threes are going to be focused on doing it the most efficient way, even if that means cutting corners. And they're also in the feeling center of intelligence when it comes to how they make decisions. However, it's interesting with the three is that they are so focused on being efficient and productive that they will push their feelings and the feelings of others aside so that they can focus on the goal. which has a time and place, right? Pros and cons to all of this. So type 4 is called the individualist or the artist, the creative. And this type is really driven by wanting to be unique, wanting to be special, to find themselves and to be accepted, but not just to be accepted for their true, authentic self. And the thing that they're running away from is the mundane, being ordinary. It would be the worst thing in the world for this type, being insignificant. And they are also in this feeling heart center where they're making decisions. But the difference between them and especially the two is that they're picking up feelings, but really in touch with their own feelings and less in touch with the feelings of others. Although they are the only type really on the Enneagram that doesn't rush to solve problems. So they actually make excellent coaches and friends because they can sit with someone's pain, difficult situation and say, I get it. I relate, rather than, most of us are like, well, let's look at the positive side, or how can we fix this? And then how they handle conflict, they're actually going to be a little more emotional. And so they're going to have a lot of emotions inside and want to express that, want to vent like, hey, my feelings are hurt. I'm sad. I'm, upset. Somebody needs to hear about that. So all of this is just really good to understand how different people handle conflict and know about yourself. Okay. So our type 5 is known as the investigator, the expert, the innovator, the observer, and they tend to be a little bit more withdrawn. Again, that's a behavior trait though. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you are a type 5 if you happen to be more withdrawn. The thing that is really driving them in life is to be seen as capable, competent, self-sufficient. So the worst thing in the world would to be in a situation where they don't have the answer. They don't know what to do. They somehow feel like they're dependent on somebody else. That is the thing that they're running away from. And this type 5, is getting into the head center, the thinking center of intelligence, where they're leading their decisions with their head. And that, again, has a lot of pros, thinking logically, taking in information, but also then you sometimes cut off the heart and the intuition because you're so like trying to figure it out all the time. And then how they handle conflict, they are the last type in the data, not drama group. And there's technical words for this if somebody's really wanting to nerd out on the Enneagram, but I'm trying to.
Oh no, I love data, not drama. That's
okay.
Perfect. We all get that.
Okay. And so they are rounding out that third type in that group, and they're thinking they are excellent at detaching. And so if you're in a relationship with a type 5 and you're an emotional person, you could see where the conflict might happen here. And they are going to handle that situation by saying, okay, let's calm down. Let's look at the data. Let's look at the data. Let's take some time though. Unlike the 3 where it's like, okay, we can solve this. They're going to take some time. They're going to need some time to look at everything, think about everything, and then come back with a solution.
I'm just going to jump in before you go to the next one and just say, I think it's so funny. And I don't know if you guys, as you're listening, if you're doing the same thing as me, but in my head, I'm like, oh, that reminds me of so-and-so, and that reminds me of so-and-so. Like there's little like things just popping up into my head that as you're talking through them, I'm like, yep, got it. It makes total sense.
Yes, I know. I do the same thing. And you can start to, think, oh my gosh, this client or my significant other or whatever. But it is so interesting. And they caution us, in my training about doing this, because I have thought that even my own parents, I nailed my mom as like, I was like, oh, she is definitely a 2. And, she turns out to be something completely different. So but it is kind of fun to start to see
it's funny you say that, because that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, well, when you were talking about the artistic one, for example, I've thought of someone in my life that, oh yeah, that's that person. But then I'm also very aware that we're just like touching the surface, right? There's so many more layers that you can go into. And I didn't mention it up front, but I know that you've sent me a couple of links, and we'll share these links with all of you that are listening and watching right now, because there's kind of like a short, I was going to say test, but a short type of activity that you can do to get a bit of an idea of what you might be. But then there's also obviously the longer one as well. So I'm jumping ahead, but anyway, so back to you. We're up to type 6.
Okay, we're up to type 6. We're rocking and rolling. Our type 6 is called the loyalist, the troubleshooter, the guardian. And the thing about the 6, and sometimes people think that they're 6 because they have anxiety, but don't we all in some way? But the 6 is actually the thing that they fear is really fear itself. And so the thing that is driving them in life is to be safe, secure, grounded, have a support, be supported. And they are making decisions, always thinking, kind of predicting worst case scenario and then coming up with a plan. And ironically, our 6s are most likely going to be the most calm in a crisis because they've thought about the 10 things that could go wrong and they are prepared for that. And I think we all probably know a couple of people who have this energy. And so they are, when it comes to making decisions, they're the second type in that head center. And it's kind of interesting for this type. They are very heady, constantly analyzing, over planning sometimes, but at the same time, their thoughts are actually repressed in the center, and because they don't trust themselves, they have a lot of self-doubt. And so that it's not making this, even if they have the data, sometimes it's questioning, did I read that right? So there's also a lot of self-doubt there, but there's a lot of amazing things about a 6 that we'll get to in the leadership styles. The thing, how they are going to handle conflict, they are also in that kind of emotional category, and their emotion is going to probably be anxiety and worry, and they're absolutely going to need to vent about that. And the types in this emotional category, and there's no right or wrong way, right? But it's interesting, and because you probably know people like this too, or maybe you are one. It's like when something happens, whether it is a worry or something you're sad about or mad about, we'll get to that one in just a second. These types want people to have the same reaction. They want to be able to vent, and then they want that person to also like really get upset about it. Right. So just something to know about, somebody on your team or yourself. Our type 7s are called the enthusiast, the energizer, the multitasker. And this type is really driven by this need for satisfaction, to feel free, to have options, to be happy, really is kind of the driver for them. And so the thing that our 7s are running away from is this feeling of being trapped in any way, and to be in emotional pain, really. And so they'll dodge and deflect and run away from hard things. And because of that, how they handle conflict is also in this positive outlook triad or group with our type 2s, where they're putting on rose-colored glasses and looking at the silver lining, and they're going to think, unlike our 2s are thinking, it's fine, it's all going to be fine, I'm here to help. Our 7s are just going to kind of say, it's fine, it's going to be fine, I'm fine. I don't know if you've ever said that, Chantel.
It's so funny. I'll jump in here because it's so funny, because yes, this is me, like to a T. There's everything in 7. I was like, yes. But I was listening, Sarah, to one of your podcasts recently, and it was one of the ones where you talked about being a type 7, and you gave all of these examples, and I was literally just there giggling because I just kept thinking, yeah, this is me to a T. So I want everyone to have that experience, depending on what they are, to really go through this process and work out what you are, because it's quite an eye-opener when you realize just how much some of these traits really reflect you. I mean, you were talking about dodging conflict and, and always wearing the rose-colored glasses and looking at the happy side of things. Yeah, that's me.
Yes. Which it can be so helpful sometimes. And then other times it's like, okay, like let's come back to reality. It is. And once you understand your number, which I didn't say in the beginning, but it is part of the process. Unlike all the other personality tests where it's like you take a test, you get a result. The Enneagram, you might take a quiz, you might take another quiz, and you might get different results, or the one that you have at the top may not end up being your dominant one, because it really is a self-identifying process. And so during that process, whether it is an hour or a year, you're asking yourself questions. You're, reflecting on things that maybe you haven't before. And so even if you don't nail your type after this podcast or a week later, that's okay, because you're still growing, you're learning just by asking yourself those questions. But yeah, so much more can open up, and just have all those like kind of funny ahas. And sometimes they're the ahas that are like painful to know about yourself, but you're like, yeah, I do that. Gosh.
Bit of a reminder sometimes.
Yes, yes. Okay, so our type 8, we got 2 more here, is called the challenger, the protector. They might be called the maverick. And this type, probably they do have the most energy out of any of the types. I haven't really talked about this group, but there is a group called the Assertive Group that has just like this future focus, what's next energy. Our 3s, 7s, and 8s are in that category, and they're looking into the future. And type 8s 100% are going fast and far into the future. And the thing that drives them is this need to feel like they're protecting themselves, and they will protect others too. Like once they have a crew that they are very loyal to, they're also watching out for those people. And so the thing that they fear the most is being harmed in some way. Being vulnerable is the most terrifying thing for our type 8s, because that opens them up to being controlled by somebody else, which is really great to know. They tend to be natural leaders. So I'm sure you have some type 8s in this community. And then also it's interesting to know, like, if you have somebody on your team that is a type 8, like what are they going to need that's different with this kind of fear of being controlled versus somebody else who actually wants to be told what to do. So and this type is in the body type with our 1s when it comes to how they make decisions. And they have a gut instinct like no other. Like they can't tell you why they did what they did. They make a decision and they're on to the next thing. And just with that kind of that forward moving high energy. And how they're going to handle conflict is they're in the same group with our 4s and our 6s, being very emotional. But the emotion that the 8 is typically going to express is anger. And really, a lot of times they're very passionate. They're huge-hearted people, but they're direct. They have that energy and they're going places. And so it comes off as anger. But for the 8s, that anger does live just below the surface. And so when they do get angry, they will express it. And then the last type is our type 9, called the peacemaker, the healer, the comforter, the mediator. And the thing for them that they're really wanting in life is harmony, is inner peace. And so the thing that they hate is to have any type of conflict, which is like the exact opposite of our type 8s. And the reason being is because they want to belong, and they want to, unlike our 4s, where they want to belong for being their authentic, true self. It's important for the type 9 to belong. And so when there's conflict, it's that they risk being cut off from the group. They risk being separated, which is really the core driver. And they are the last type in our positive outlook type with our 2s and our 7s. And the interesting thing with the 9s, when there's a problem, and 7s do this a little bit too, a lot, but 9s are very numb to how they feel. So they have just numbed out completely. And so they're going an average health, not all. There's some very healthy or very in touch with their feelings. But for the most part, they're just kind of numbed out. and merged so that they don't cause any conflict. It's just easier not to have an opinion. And so when conflict happens, they're going to be positive, but sometimes they might even be like, oh, there's a problem. Like, what problem? It's fine. And then the last number also in the body center, that intuition center with how they make decisions. But again, there's three types that kind of are repressed in their main center, and our nines are repressed in their intuition. And again, that's just because they tend to be so out of touch with themselves that their body is talking to them. They might have physical sensations like, yes, do this, no, don't do this, but they're so out of touch with it at times that they're unable to really hear it and make decisions from that place. So that is the overview.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you for explaining each of those so clearly. And I think, as I mentioned on the way through, I feel like as you hear them, you start to recognize some characteristics and things that you can associate either with yourself, and that's what, you know, we want, the starting point that we want, but also with other people in our lives. And that was just the top line, but obviously everyone could go a little bit deeper than that as well. But I want to take that knowledge now and talk a little bit about leadership, because the next section that we're going to dive into is leadership style by type, and specifically how to use it to grow to be a more effective leader. Okay, Sarah, so let's dive into this next section. Tell us a little bit about leadership style by type. What do we need to know?
Okay, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of strengths and challenges or struggles for each type. So, the leadership strengths for a type 1 is that they are always, you can count on them to do the right thing. They're going to be ethical, responsible, very hardworking. They're going to take things from good to great. If they were going to read a book, that good to great would be like their book motto. They're going to create processes and structure, and they're always going to be open to improving themselves and the world around them. Now, the challenge with that, though, sometimes can be is that they see the world very black and white. The ones have an inner critic like no other. We all have that, but the ones is very, very harsh. And so, because of that, they are also going to be more critical of the people around them. And they can come across as rigid, and they might even miss projects because it's not perfect enough. So they're going to miss those deadlines. It's just not ready. It's never ready. It's never perfect enough. And they can take on too much and risk burning out because nobody is going to be able to do it as good as they can. Our type 2, again, called the helper. Their strengths is that they have the superpower of this intuition, being able to read another person. So they are amazing on teams for understanding how somebody might be feeling if they're having a bad day. And then also not just being aware of their needs, but also giving the person what they need to solve whatever problem it is or issue that they're having. They're very flexible. They're going to be willing to pitch in however they can. I think there's a book called like Servant Leader, like that would be their book. They are very into building community and very, as mentioned, intuitive, and getting people in the right jobs is also a superpower of our twos. Now, the thing that you're going to have to watch out for, a challenge that you might run into, is being too focused on other people and kind of getting lost in the bigger picture. You are also going to risk burnout as our type 2 because you're so focused on others that you neglect your own feelings. How are you tired? Are you stressed? You're not paying attention to that. And then it might be difficult for our type 2s to provide honest, direct feedback. And so, you know, their teams might have a hard time understanding, well, like, was this good or not? Because they're not going to want to say anything bad. Our type 3, which again was the achiever, they have this superpower of efficiency that we kind of talked about, very strategic planners. Our type 7s and our type 8s are also big picture thinkers, but the superpower of the 3 is that they can actually make it from point A to point B. It's not just an idea. They're going to make that happen. They're going to bring passion and hard work to their teams. And really, our type 3s are very natural leaders, very comfortable leading a team. The thing that you're going to have to watch out for as a type 3 is that they can be impatient. We kind of talked about how they deal with emotions of others and their own. And so they might come across as not caring necessarily. Like the 2 is going to have this big open arms, come talk to me about everything. And a 3 might think or might be thinking or giving off the vibe, like, don't bother me. We got things to do. They're going to sometimes get frustrated if they feel like somebody's wasting their time. And it's going to be hard for them to delegate. Again, we kind of have some themes here because they want every project to be amazing, to be successful. And so sometimes they feel like they're the only ones that's going to be able to really pull it off. Our type 4, again, was called the individualist. And these guys make everything beautiful. They are creative. They can turn a room or a project or a concept into just this like aesthetically pleasing object or concept. They naturally see opportunities to add originality and unique touches. So like, hello, marketing department could really benefit from somebody like this. They are not afraid of tough conversations. So they can sit down and have that honest, direct feedback. And they are going to be looking for their purpose in life. So any type of work that you can give them or yourself to do, as if you're leading yourself, that has a lot of meaning. Yes, we're going to have to do the mundane things, but make sure the most of your time is living in that higher purpose. Because on the flip side, when you are a type 4 and you're doing the mundane task the majority of the time, you're going to lose steam, you're going to lose motivation, you're going to want to quit. And these folks will sometimes procrastinate with those types of mundane tasks. And they can get frustrated when they have this like beautiful idea, this creative idea, and they're going to share it with the team. And then it doesn't happen. That can be like a huge source of frustration for the 4s. And then they can get stuck, like we kind of talked about, like in their own emotions, like feeling like, oh, this isn't good enough, or I'm having a really hard day and I'm unable to move forward with anything else. So just something to be cautious of. Our type 5 was the observer. And these guys are very objective, very critical thinkers, and great problem solvers. And so whenever they have a challenge, they're not going to have an emotional reaction. They're going to come at it with a very critical analytics, like, let's look at the data. Let's look at what are the numbers telling us here? They're genuinely lifelong learners. They love to learn, also very improvement focused, and they're going to research everything. So if somebody comes to them with a problem, they're not just going to give them a one-word answer solution. They are going to take it to Google. They're going to pull all their resources and get a very in-depth solution. So like when buying equipment, they're going to be the people like looking at all the reviews, comparing things. And then the challenge for that is that you're going to sometimes get stuck in research mode and not be able to move into action mode. And then they are more isolated, tend to be more introverted is their preference. So sometimes collaborating on a team can be a bit difficult for the type 5s. And our type 6s are called the troubleshooters, also very good at looking at the data, explaining complex problems and making them very easy to understand. Again, like, what a talent as a leader to be able to take that concept and just distill it down for a client or for their team. They're very humble and honest and witty. And they are excellent on teams. Like, collaboration is something that they excel at very much. And they are called the troubleshooter because they might come across as pessimistic, but it's just because they care about the people on their team and want to avoid catastrophe or anything going wrong for them. So they'll bring up things like, what if what happens, or what if this happens? And it can come across as a downer. And that's maybe a challenge to be aware of, but it's coming from a place of they want to take care. They're very loyal. They want to take care of the team. They want to take care of the cause, the mission. And so just, balancing some of that on a team, not crushing creativity or new ideas with all of that analyzing. And then sometimes for this type 2, they're in the head, they're analyzing, they're thinking, and they can overwhelm people with a lot of data, and to the point where it's like, I don't know, what am I supposed to be doing? And our type sevens, called the enthusiasts, they are incredible vision casters. They are going to naturally kick off initiatives. They can be counted on to move things along, very good at reframing problems into opportunities. The downside of that is that they have so many ideas, but will sometimes struggle to actually make them happen. So I call it like that idea graveyard. I don't know if you have one of those.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. That was one of the things that I was like, yeah.
Yeah. So credible visionaries just sometimes like the execution part. So when you know that about yourself, right, then you can surround your people with the people that can help you fill in those gaps. They also tend to get bored really easily, like feeling trapped. They will want to run away from those types of things, which, there's going to be hard things that come up in business. So again, when you know that about yourself, you can kind of manage, regulate. Our type 8 is called the challenger. Also natural leaders, also excellent at moving things down the field, very confident and capable, where our type 6s might have some self-doubt. Our type 8s have zero self-doubt. They are very confident, loads of energy, and they are open to new ideas if others can prove why that idea would actually be better than what they're already doing. They're totally fine with having difficult conversations, being direct. Now, the thing that they're going to have to watch out for is they have this low tolerance for small details, for anybody holding them, what seems like holding their ideas back. They will tend to be too confrontational at times. So just, something to be aware of, and want to be too controlling, because again, their core driver, their core fear is they don't ever want to be controlled. So they're going to do all the controlling. They can be a little intimidating as well. So just something to be aware of. And then lastly, the Peacemaker are type 9s. They are also amazing on a team. They want to share the power with others. They're going to create structure. So they have that ability to create predictable systems and routines, but also they're going to add in this positivity and this really inclusive vibe. And when something happens, they're going to blame the system rather than an individual. They want all the voices at the table to be heard. And the thing that they're going to have to be careful of is that they can sometimes be too accommodating. They want everybody's opinion before they can make a decision, which just always, isn't always practical or doable. And then they can avoid taking the initiative, even as the leader, because again, sometimes they're going to have that self-doubt. And then they may not be the most direct communicators either. So again, just something to be aware of. So I know we went through that fast, but was that okay?
Yeah, that was perfect.
Okay.
It was perfect. Do you find in the work that you do, and I know that you've got a long career history before you started specializing in the Enneagram, and you have exposure to a lot of different industries and people. Does there tend to be a particular type that you see as the more common in someone that perhaps leads a business, like your CEO or your business owner? Is there a certain type that sort of gravitates towards those roles, do you find?
It is probably you're going to see a lot of 3s in leadership positions. You're going to see a lot of 8s, 7s, 1s potentially. But that doesn't mean that the other types cannot lead. And so that is something that, I work with people on. It's like, oh, I can never be a leader, or I'm not good at it. We all have our strengths, but my cousin, he works for a big global company, and they brought in somebody to talk about the Enneagram. And he was saying that like 9 out of the 10 people on his executive team were type 3s. I think there was like one guy that was a 1. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because you do start to think about, okay, so which traits are going to be really beneficial. But I like that you said that, it's not exclusively those types. There are actually, opportunities for everyone. And I think that probably leads us to a really good point, which is talking about how to actually, once you start to understand your own Enneagram, how you can use that knowledge to work better with your team or work better with your clients. So what type of advice can you give us around that one?
And to that point, and it has to do with this too, is once you understand your type, the Enneagram is really interesting because it gives you another type that you go to when you're growing. And then it gives you another type when you're stressed. And so the 9, for example, goes to the type 3 in growth when they're being intentional with their decisions and their life and that sort of thing. And so they can absolutely like dip into that achiever role, even as a 9 that may not be as natural of a leader, which I love that you can pull those in. There's at the end of the day, what this is and what we're talking about is really self-awareness. And so it doesn't matter if there's a new tool that comes out next year called, I don't know, the rainbow method. I have no idea. Rainbow and unicorns is like what came to mind. I don't know.
It's the first thing that popped into your head.
Yes, it's like, yes. And actually I have my unicorn behind me, so maybe that's what happened. But that's some 7 energy. But it does, if you find help, if you are helped by this tool, then use it. If you are not, then don't. And we are the common denominator in all of our relationships. And so really it is the kindest, most loving, really the best thing that we could do is to learn about ourselves, take care of ourselves for those that are in our life, whether it's personal relationships or at work. We spend so much time throughout our entire life learning about other people. Since elementary school, we've been learning about presidents and activists. And I just don't know, and I'll speak for myself, that I have really dug that deep into learning about myself, spend even a fraction learning about myself as I have other people, which again has a purpose for sure. But it's like, I'll take a quiz, I'll take a test, and I got these 4 letters, or I got these 5 traits, and then let's move on. And so it's really up to you, how much you want to start digging in. And it's not always a pleasant process because you are faced with the things that there's this concept, and this has to do with how we can use this on this team. It's called the Jahari Window. And if you can imagine a box split into 4 smaller boxes, and there's this section that really we're wanting to get into called it's the open box. And this is what is known to others about us. And this is what we know about ourselves. So that's really the ideal spot. And then the next box over is our blind spot, which is what is known to others about us, but we're blind to. And then there's a box that's our hidden self, which is our true self, or we think it's our true self. It might just be our ego, but we don't want to share with the rest of the world. So that's kind of our hidden self. And then there's an unknown box where we're unknown to ourselves and unknown to others. And really the Enneagram can help you understand your blind spots that your team might be seeing about you. And it's shining light on those areas so that you can grow, you can be a better leader, you can be a better teammate. And what does better mean? That's kind of ambiguous at times we say that, but it's so that, what is your goal for yourself, your team, your company, your clients? And by learning about yourself, understanding those blind spots that might be hard to look at, and also understanding your strengths and then own those, you can step into this person who will always be growing. I don't think we ever arrive, but be able to get to those goals, that ideal vision for yourself and your team and your company quicker, maybe more effectively, and have, better relationships, better conversations. So I kind of got off track. What was the question?
No, but it was really interesting hearing about you called it the Jahari box. Is that right?
Yeah, it's called the Jahari Window.
Window, sorry.
Yes, the Jahari Window. Yeah, and it's used a lot in like therapy and personal development. It is so interesting.
Fascinating. Well, so as you've been talking through, I guess for me, I always like to think back to how can we apply this practically within our working environment, within our industry. And I think about, when we are going to a team meeting, for example, we go into a team huddle and perhaps we're talking about a strategy or we're talking about an idea, and everyone kind of comes from a different angle. And I think that, having this knowledge about yourself, but also potentially about others that surround us, I think is so beneficial. Because to me, understanding why my reaction as a 7 might be quite different to someone's reaction who's perhaps more analytical about something or wants to look at the research in more detail. And, like, I just think it's always so interesting to take the time to learn about these things, because I really feel like they can be very beneficial. And if I then wear my personal training hat and I think about, we all know that there are some clients that we get along with like a house on fire. It's just fantastic from the start. But there are other clients that perhaps the communication is more difficult, or we just don't have that natural affiliation to them. Well, then what a great opportunity to come back and re-listen to each of these types that you've just talked about. And maybe we then go, oh, hang on a second, maybe that's why perhaps that communication is not as easygoing, because perhaps we are two quite different types. So therefore, with that knowledge, what can I do to better understand them? And, as my client, and then perhaps if I have that knowledge, then we can work better together. That's kind of my practical application of what we're talking about here.
You said that so well, like better than anything that I could have said. And that is so true, is that understanding, even if you don't know somebody else's type, is just like, oh my gosh, here are different ways that people see the world. And I'll give you an example. So I was working with a gentleman, and as a type 7, I have this future focused energy. So my orientation to time is in the future. So I'm always thinking about the future, planning for things, just let's do it, let's try it. And I was really struggling with him to move forward with things that we had talked about over and over again. And it felt like we were going nowhere. He just kept having questions after questions. And at this point, I didn't know about the Enneagram necessarily in this way. And after I started learning about it, this example always comes up for me, because he ended up being somebody who had a past orientation to time. And so he was constantly thinking, how did this go last time? What happened last time? I want to make sure I avoid the things and that did go wrong, and make sure that, nothing happens. And then he would also get really nostalgic about how it happened. And I'm like, let's go, let's move forward. And so that neither one of us is right or wrong. And I think you need some of that forward energy. And then also you need some of that, like, let's pause and think, how did that go? Yeah. And so just understanding, like, even that, the fact that there's some people that are like really present and which is good, but they're only able to see the mountain in front of them, where they can't see how far they've come, and they don't remember that there's something on the other side of the mountain. And just even those little things like that can really help you see how other people are viewing the world. It's not just the core motive, but that's the place to start. But then there's all these other ways that you can really help somebody, because by me telling him, just do it over and over, like, let's go, like, is not helpful at all. Right. And so I know that we probably have, your listeners probably have those conversations with clients, and then also with team members, with somebody who's a 5 and wants to research, the next big equipment buy. And you're thinking, no, I know in my body, like, this is the right decision.
Gut feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that there's going to be their conflict. And rather than getting frustrated and shutting down and just doing what you always do, both people, it's like, oh, I'm acting like this, because really at the end of the day, most of us are on default mode. We're on autopilot. And we're going to use the excuse, well, this is just how I am. That's just how they are. And that is not true. But in order to make intentional change, you first have to know where you're starting, know what you even need to change. So there's self-awareness, and then there's self-acceptance, like, just accept where you are starting right now, and then make the decision, if you want to start making intentional change. And it starts with yourself, right?
It makes complete sense, Sarah. I honestly feel like I want to talk to you for hours, because I know that we have really just skimmed the surface when it comes to the Enneagram, but I feel like I have learned so much from you today. And I really, really, truly hope that the FBP family out there feel the same way. And it kind of just, it gives them that little preview into what they can start to learn if they dive that little bit deeper into the Enneagram. So let's talk about just one action. We call this our Keep Me Fit Bizpiration.
Get your pen ready now for Keep Me's Fit Bizpiration.
And for that today, just tell us, what is that number one immediate action that you recommend that all of the FBP families should do right now to take this information and to start to move forward, perhaps discover a little bit more about themselves and the Enneagram?
Well, there is a free quiz that we'll put in there in the show notes. That's 10 minutes to take, maybe less. And that is a great starting point. I also have a resource for you guys based on your leadership style and like what it is, the view from inside that type that might also be helpful. But at the end of the day, again, these tests, these resources are giving you questions to start to take yourself off default mode. Our personality really at the end of the day is just unquestioned patterns of thoughts and behaviors and feelings. And so when we're faced with how we are and we can kind of confront that or question that, whether it's what you came back with on your Enneagram quiz, to be able to say, that's not me at all. And then question, well, why not? What about that doesn't feel true? Or, oh my gosh, that's so me. Why is that so me? And just start to ask those questions. But I would recommend starting with some sort of resource, the quiz, the guide that we'll provide to start on that path.
Keep Me, smarter member retention. KeepMe.ai.
Amazing. That is a great action to finish up on today. Well, Sarah, thank you so much. It has been a joy to listen to you, to learn from you today. We're really grateful for you coming on and being a guest. And I just want to remind everyone, of course, we will put the video, we will put the audio, we'll put those resources all in the show notes. Plus, make sure that you check out Sarah's podcast, the Enneagram MBA. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Awesome. So guys, make sure you jump on, take a listen to that as well. I'll put the link to that in the show notes and Sarah's contact details. So Sarah, thank you so much for being a guest on the Fitness Business Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.